So the first thing I need to do is import that photo into Lightroom. I have to bring it into the Lightroom environment. So I'm going to come up here and click on the plus, and I'm going to add a new photo, and it's on my desktop now. It is DSF 1296, there it is, and review for import. Okay, I can look at it, make sure it's the one I want. It is, so I'm going to add one photo. So that photo is now in my library. If I looked at what I've imported just now, there it is. Look at everything I've imported in the last hour. There's the rest of them. Recently added, let's see, everything I added. Let's just look at everything. Okay. So there's all my new photos. So I'm just going to double click on this photo and select it. And so there's the digital version of that film photograph that I played with earlier. Now if I zoom in on here, look, you can see the chandelier in here, but not nearly as bright as it was in that other photograph. I'm going to see if I can bring that out. Okay, so let's go through and we're going to do this photo 3 ways. I'm going to move into the edit mode. These are all going to be black and white photos, so monochrome. And I can look at some of my other profiles, my black and white profiles. Now notice that barn was kind of reddish. If I use a red filter, the barn gets a little brighter. Orange filter, it kind of brightens the wood a little, darkens the grass a little. Green filter is going to brighten the grass. I'm going to pick this green filter because I like the balance, the color balance to start here. Okay. So I need to move this out of my way. The first thing I'm going to do is crop this a little bit. It wasn't quite straight. I want to get a little bit of, I'm just going to put a little bit of rotation in here to straighten out the verticals. Okay, so I've cropped it. And so I'm going to start by opening up the shadows to see if I can bring the chandelier out in the background here. So, oh, look at that. Watch that. Look at that. Look at how much information was hidden back there. You can see the actual stable. You can see the chandelier on the roof. Isn't that something that changed that one thing and that one thing only? I'm going to take it back down. So that's at 0. And I'm opening the shadow up. And look how I've opened up that. Isn't that awesome? That's why Lightroom, that's why people pay money for Lightroom. I'm going to bring my highlights down just a little bit. If I bring the white value up, I add contrast. I'm not sure that's what I want to do right now. And decrease the black point just a little. It's okay, I'm going to let that go a little bit dark because I don't want that to overpower the photograph. And maybe add a little bit more contrast. So, okay, you can see there's quite a bit of detail now. Really nice detail in this shutter. You can still see the background really well. Nice detail in the wood and the grass. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. If I decide that's all I want to do, I want to call that good. There's version number 1. So I am going to export. Give it a custom name, not sepia feather plant, but barn version 1. And more options, output sharpening. Okay. So I'm going to export that to my scan black and white negatives folder. All right. Version number 1 is done. Now I'm going to stay with this version and we'll do a little bit more monkeying around. I'm going to come down to the color mixer because here's where you're going to find the greatest amount of activity. If you're starting with a color photograph, you're starting with a digital photograph, it's going to be different working from a scanned black and white film neg. But if you're working from a color negative or a color digital file, here's what you can do. Now, let's pay attention to the grass right now. The grass is kind of, there's some green grass, some of it was worn out, so let's say green, yellow, brown were the predominant colors in the grass. I'm going to darken the green. I'm going to bring the green slider to the left, and you're going to see it darken. Bring it up. I can make it really bright white. I can make it really dark. I kind of like it. Dark, white, dark, white, dark, white. I think I like it lighter. If I go too high, it's going to look a little bit out of control. Okay. Now, if I'm going to come in and work with the yellow, and that should look at the grass that was brown. I can darken that, or I can lighten that part too. So now that's really white. If I bring them both down, it changes the photograph completely. Bring them up a little. I can keep them dark, leave the contrast in here, but I'm actually going to brighten. I'm going to lighten them up because I like, you know what? I like it like that. So, and then the barn had some red in it, so I can darken the wood in the barn. If I bring the orange down, I'll get some darkening. I think if I bring the magenta down. Okay, so there. Oh, I wish that would stop doing that. Honestly, I don't know what I think I'm hitting my trackpad with 2 fingers. I've got a Band-Aid on one of my fingers, and I can't feel when I'm touching the trackpad. Okay, so anywho, so there's some minor changes. Okay, I'm going to put a little vignette on this, so I'm going to darken the outside edge. And I need to open up the midpoint, so I just want just the corners darkened, just a little bit, just enough so you can't see it, you can't see that it's there. And since this isn't a black and white film photograph, I'm actually going to add film grain and make it look filmish. So I'm going to add a little artificial film grain. Okay. Now, I'm going to come back up I'm going to move over to the crop tool. And I'm going to just do a little crop on this. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to crop this just a little bit. I don't want to take too much out, but I just want to see if I can balance this a little bit more so it's not so heavy on the grass at the bottom. All right, file, export, barn version 2, export, export. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to, I've done a lot of what I want here. I'm not going to mess with the tone curves. I'm done with color and effects here. I'm going to add a little split tone. I'm going to tone this photograph. So I'm going to click on the shadows, and I'm going to add just a tiniest bit of like red brown to the shadows. You know what? And I'm going to leave it that way. I'm not even going to change. I'm not going to add any toning to the highlights. So the highlights are still going to be a really neutral gray, but the shadows have the tiniest bit of sort of a brick red to them. And you're not going to notice this until you compare it to a version that's not toned. So I'm going to export this. Version number 3. Export one photo. Export one photo. Okay, so I'm done there. Close out of Lightroom. Excuse me. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to open my 3 versions. Okay. Let's go to slideshow. Okay, so let me go back here. So here's version number 1. Pretty straightforward. I just essentially converted this from a color photograph to a black and white photograph, brought the shadow areas up so you can see inside here, left everything else the way it was. Got no complaints about this one at all. Version number 2. It's cropped slightly. I lightened the grass, darkened the wood, added a little bit of contrast to it. Awesome. Version number 2 is complete. And then version number 3 was that slight sepia, that slight brick tone. And I don't know, it's pretty subtle. If I go back and forth, you're just going to see it fade. It's almost like somebody faded the color out, faded the color in. You get used to looking at it like this, and it's a warm tone black and white. It's still monochrome. You still perceive it as being a black and white photo. But you go back to version number 2, and version number 2 looks really cold. It looks very cool, like a blue-black. And then this is a warm kind of like brick black. So there's 3 versions.